G'day, I'm Owen, you've joined the pub test, and this is the 6th video in the Jack the Ripper victim series that'll be put into one long video eventually. But if you are following along as we do these, then let's get into it. So this is the first of the official Jack the Ripper victims as it is considered today. And it was Mary Ann Nichols, commonly known as Polly Nichols, but she was born in 1845 as Mary Ann Walker. Yet it was in 1864 that she got married to William Nichols. And then, starting from 1866, so when she was about 21 years old, she had her first child, and they had 5 children together, the last one being born in 1879. So that's quite the time span between the children. Now, there could be reasons for this gap as well, not just because it just happened that way, but they did have a volatile relationship, William and Polly. They split up many, many times during their life, but then got back together again. It was in 1881, so their last child was only 2 years old, that they split up permanently. And it is important to note that at about the age of 21, it could have been a bit before, but her oldest son, Edward, also moved out of the home and went to live with Polly's father. And that detail is important at the end. Now, it is important to note that why they separated is a matter of conjecture. It's stated that Polly suggested he was having an affair, which he doesn't deny that he was starting to see someone else, but he said that only happened after Polly left. That is also something we will touch on a bit later, because I do think it just tells more of Polly's story as well. Yet her life doesn't go very well. Now, it is suggested that she formed a relationship with someone for a little while during the time between 1881 and 1888, but that would appear to be a very brief thing if it did happen properly, as has been suggested. But what we do see in Polly's life is she is now going from workhouse to workhouse. So in 1888, though, there's just a little detail here which is fascinating, that she sent a letter to her father saying, look, I've got a good situation now. I've got a job in service. So she was working in someone's house. So she's no longer at the lodging houses. She's no longer on the streets. And she said, these people are great. They don't drink. I'm going to get along really well here. Probably meaning that this is going to sort out her life. And she also asked, does the boy have work? Which is obviously referring to her oldest son. Now, I don't know if she ever got a response back from that letter. Have not been able to find it. But sadly, it didn't take long before she got fired from that job for stealing. So, unfortunately, this did not work out well for her, and she's back out in workhouses and in the DOS houses. Now, a DOS house, we don't use that term. It's an English term. When I say we, most people, other than if you're English, use that term. In the United States, I believe it's called a flop house. In Australia, we'd probably refer to a bunk house. But regardless, we get the idea. You're bunking down with other people. It's cheap accommodation. And the DOS houses in England allowed a man and a woman to share the room, which are the more reputable places of accommodation would not allow that unless you were married. But the DOS house, well, they would look the other way, so you just needed to get your DOS money. And it was on this night, August 31st of 1888, that Polly Nichols is challenged by the manager of a particular DOS house where she often stayed. So she had a regular room at this place, and he said, look, where's your money? And she said, you keep that room. I'm going to go out and get my DOS money now. But she also made a strange comment about what a pretty bonnet I have now. But she said to a friend that she had her DOS money already that night 3 times over. So what did she do with that money? Well, she'd gone down to the pub and spent it on gin. A large glass of gin. 3 times. Because the DOS money, the same amount of money that you could pay for your room, was the same amount of money they would charge you for a large glass of gin. So she'd had 3 of these gins already. Now, I don't know exactly what a large glass of gin would have been, but if it was a reasonable, even tumbler, you're probably getting close to drinking a bottle of gin already. And it is said that she was rather tipsy. The effects of alcohol were obviously evident. And the last she is seen is walking down the road by herself. But then it was around, and we don't know exactly when, but around 3:45 in the morning, that a man by the name of Charles Cross comes across this person lying on the ground. He sees another person walking down the street and calls him over, who happened to be Robert Paul. And we might think these 2 blokes were up to no good because they're walking down the road at 3:45 in the morning, yet that was the regular time when the city started coming to life, because that was rush hour. People are heading off to work. Now, they were walking to work on a bit of a lit up road. So Polly Nichols is lying on the pavement not far from one of these main thoroughfares. But Charles Cross says this person is dead. Robert Paul feels that there's still warmth on the body and says, no, actually, I think there's even a heartbeat. I think she's still alive. But then Charles Cross says, well, look, we got to make her look respectable, and asked Robert Paul to help adjust the body, is the term that was used. And he says, I'm not having a bar of that. Now, that is odd. I just want to point out. Not getting into this Charles Cross, Robert Paul situation in this video. That will be coming later. There is a lot to deep dive about what happened here. But the important thing to note is Robert Paul thought she was still alive. But they decide together that they can't be late for work, and off they go. But a policeman, only a few minutes later, so they've already taken off, but only a couple of minutes later, a policeman came across the body. These 2 blokes are said to have seen a policeman and said, hey, you're wanted back there because there's a body. But the policeman calls the doctor at 4 a.m. So 15 minutes later, the doctor is called. Now, we don't know exactly how long it took the doctor to turn up on the scene, but he soon pronounces her dead. But the thing that he says is she's only been dead for a couple of minutes. So Robert Paul's assumption or feeling was probably correct, that she hadn't died yet. It's not to say they could have saved her with CPR, no, because this crime was really bad. There was the cut to the throat and also some vital body parts removed. Polly Nichols was not going to survive. But this particular crime made headlines because of the graphic nature of it. And a big inquest was held where they were dragging people back. So Charles Cross, Robert Paul, other people were being questioned about this event. And the papers linked Emma Smith, Martha Tabram, and Polly Nichols all together for this particular one. Now that does change as we go through this. But right now, the media explosion happened and people were getting worried about who was out there committing these atrocities. Now, unlike the others, quite a few people were charged over this crime, but no one was ever convicted. But what is of note, and I think as regards Polly Nichols, at her funeral, so her funeral costs were paid by 3 people. Her father, her ex-husband, William Nichols, and her son, Edward. They all chipped in for the burial. Now, what is of note is that at the funeral, Edward, her oldest son, did not have any interactions with his father. So that would suggest that William's story as to why those two separated may not be 100% accurate, but rather his telling of it. Because Edward would have been old enough to know what was going on in the house. I mean, kids at a young age are fairly sharp, but this oldest son had grown up seeing the interactions and the separations. He would have really known what happened in that house. And so that does tell a story. And so for him to see then his mother going on a path of self-destruction, no doubt him thinking that it was caused by his father kicking her out of the house, because what could she do? And William cut off financial support. So Polly Nichols was a victim of circumstance here. It's easy to judge, say, well, what a terrible lifestyle for a mother of 5 to get into. But what would you do back then? And unfortunately for her, yes, it did end up costing her life. And sadly, we only know about Polly Nichols because of her connection to Jack the Ripper. But who is the next person on this list? So that was the first official victim of Jack the Ripper, and we will continue going in chronological order here. And there is still a lot to unpack in a further video about Charles Cross and Robert Paul. There's some interesting details that haven't been mentioned yet in this series. So look out for that down the track. As always, though, I'm interested in your thoughts on this one. Like Polly Nichols, she really was a victim of circumstance like so many other women back in those days. Certainly did not deserve the end of a life that she got, which, if she was still alive at the time, is just absolutely diabolical. It is horrendous, and I try not to think about that too much at all. But thank you very much for watching. It is genuinely appreciated. Smash out that subscribe button. Give it a good old whack. I'm Owen. You've been watching The Pub Test, and we will see you on the next one.